Princess Thalira expected silence when the human was brought to her chambers, bowed head, grateful obedience. Instead, the man stepped through the gold archway with a healing brace on one arm, burned scars across his neck, and the expression of someone who had watched a city die and no longer found royalty impressive. He looked once at the trays of fruit, once at the hovering service drones, and said, "So this is where the emergency power went." The chamber froze, the guards gripped their shock spears, and Princess Thalira, daughter of the Celestine throne, stared at the human survivor she had requested from the refugee registry, not from kindness, but because a human servant had become fashionable among the younger houses. She had wanted one who could carry robes and make rivals jealous. What she got instead was Jonas Vale of Halcyon Reach, a frontier survivor with scars, bad manners, and opinions. The princess wanted obedience. The human brought memory, and memory had teeth. Jonas Vale had once been a systems technician on a mining moon torn open by raiders. One of only a few hundred survivors pulled from vacuum, Thalira had skimmed his file only long enough to see resilient and adaptable. Now he stood in court gray, with the collar stiff against his throat, and when the chief attendant ordered him to kneel, Jonas glanced at the polished floor and said, "If kneeling improves the air filtration, I am willing to negotiate." The attendant nearly choked. Curiosity made her ask whether humans were always this insolent, and Jonas answered, "Only the ones who survive long enough to lose patience for decorative nonsense." She told him his duty was to serve and remain useful. Jonas nodded once and said, "Then my first useful act is telling you that your West Wing staff is exhausted, your kitchen inventory system is lying, and your private shuttle bay security is an invitation to murder." The room went silent again. Thalira laughed and asked whether surviving one disaster had made him an expert in palace affairs. Jonas looked toward the lower city smoke and said, "No, princess. Surviving disaster made me very good at recognizing the early stages." That answer lingered because she soon noticed the things he had named. Servants covering double shifts, expired medkits, guards standing for elegance instead of angles. The palace still gleamed. But Jonas walked through it like a man tapping walls for cracks. Some survivors do not heal into softness, they heal into alarms. Within days, he had become impossible to ignore. He carried trays while rerouting wasteful service drones, repaired a balcony lock no engineer had fixed in months, and informed a visiting duke that his bodyguards were standing in the exact pattern preferred by assassins who wanted crossfire and panic, then calmly moved them himself. Thalira followed the trail of offended nobles with growing irritation and deeper interest. Once she asked why he could not simply do what he was told like every other servant, Jonas was kneeling by an emergency panel, hands black with dust, and he answered without looking up. "Because everyone here thinks comfort is the natural state of the universe. People like me know comfort is a temporary engineering problem." She hated how much sense that made, and hated more that the palace began feeling different after he said it. Less like splendor, more like a fragile machine held together by habit. When Jonas started asking about guard schedules, locked maintenance shafts, and why the musician's balcony had been opened twice in the last week, she almost ordered him back into silence. Almost. But by then she trusted his unease more than the reassurances of polished men. The court thought he was rude. She was beginning to suspect he was simply early. The Feast of Ascension proved it. Half the royal houses gathered beneath the crystal dome. Fountains glowed beneath silver music, and Thalira stood beside her mother while Jonas remained near the wine service. Quiet for once, scanning exits, servants, cooling vents, then he moved. 1 second he was still. The next, he crossed the floor, seized her wrist, and dragged her behind the central dais down, he shouted. And the dome shattered with gunfire a heartbeat later. False musicians dropped their instruments and drew pulse rifles. 2 guards died where they stood. Drones burst from the ceiling. Nobles screamed. And the feast became a kill box of broken glass and panic instead of fury. Thalira watched Jonas overturn a banquet table for cover, slam an emergency barrier switch, and start issuing instructions with brutal clarity. Kitchen staff to the service tunnels. West stairs are compromised. Blue uniforms are infiltrators. Move low. He knew the palace better than people born into it. Because unlike them, he had walked it like something that could fail when one infiltrator rushed the dais. Jonas met him with a serving knife and the kind of efficiency that comes from older nightmares. The attack began collapsing almost immediately, because every move the assassins made ran into someone who had already spent weeks noticing the weak seams they planned to use. The palace had wanted a servant. What it had actually acquired was advance warning in human form. The coup broke in 7 minutes, mostly because Jonas kept ruining timing. He vented smoke into the upper gallery to blind the marksman, rerouted service drones into the rear corridor as moving cover, and forced panicked nobles toward the only exits not already compromised. By the time palace security regained control, 3 infiltrators were dead, 9 captured, and Princess Thalira was alive behind the shattered dais with blood on one sleeve that was not hers. Afterward, ministers demanded to know how a servant had known murder was coming. Jonas answered with the same calm irritation he had brought into her chamber on the first day. Because your guards were drilled for ceremony, because your staff was stretched thin, because one vent above the balcony had already been loosened, because the musicians had calluses on the wrong fingers, because people preparing murder always leave behind maintenance problems. Nobody liked that answer. Then the queen offered him a medal and a permanent place among the palace staff. Jonas refused the title of servant. "I have served enough ruins already," he said, then turned to Thalira and added, "If the princess wants honesty, strategy, and someone willing to offend her before she dies of preventable stupidity, I can stay." The court gasped. Thalira smiled, stepped down from the throne platform, and offered him a place at her side instead of at her feet. Because she had asked for a servant and received something far rarer, a survivor with opinions, and in a palace full of elegant liars. That proved worth more than obedience ever could.